I was standing outside work having a smoke. I was looking at the bike rack and thinking about how it was silly they just placed one there and didn't bolt it down or anything. Then a bird footprint showed up. Just one footprint. Like a ghost bird put just one foot down in the middle of the otherwise undisturbed snow. It happened right in front of me. I was looking exactly where it had happened, when it happened. Very weird. Most likely the snow just happened to collapse in that shape, but it was still extremely strange. My boyfriend told me this one. His sister and mom confirmed it to be true. He was driving through Texas on his way to visit relatives. It's dead of night on a 2-lane highway in the middle of nowhere. He hasn't passed a gas station in a while, and his tank was getting low, so he decided to fill up at the next available station. After a while, he rolls into a small town. There's a lit-up diner on the right and a local gas station on the left. All the lights are on, and cars are filling up, so he figures this place is open. It seems to be exceptionally busy for this time of night, but he really needs gas, so he decides to wait in line to fill up. There's only 2 cars ahead of him, so it shouldn't take too long. At this point, his sister wakes up in the back seat. What's taking so long? It's been like 10 minutes and not a single car has moved. Then all of a sudden, his sister blurts out, "None of the people are moving." Sure enough, the people waiting in the cars, the people filling up, the cashier, and the people in the convenience store, none of them have moved since they pulled into the station. My boyfriend's heart is racing at this point, but he pulls up to get a closer look. Sure enough, every single person at this gas station is as still as a mannequin. Needless to say, they got out of there as fast as they could. I kind of wish they would have taken pictures because I would have loved to see that. I'm from Finland, and that's where these things I'm about to describe to you happened. This was some years ago, pre-smartphones and GPS era. It was the end of the summer, and myself and 2 friends were on a camping trip way up in the north, in Lapland. The mosquito season was over, and the weather was cooling down in an anticipation for the coming fall. The 3 of us had packed food and gear for a 10-day trek. The car we arrived in had been left at the parking lot of a visitor center. This happened within the premises of the Urho-Kanokin National Park, a 985 square mile stretch of wilderness near the Russian border. The terrain there varies greatly, from treeless and semi-mountainous to dense forests of spruce and pine and dwarf birch. There are lots of swamps there also. Seeing reindeer is not uncommon, and some nights you might hear wolves in the distance. You can run into bear or a wolverine in this place, but of course normally they avoid people. We mostly camped in a tent, but some nights we used shelters and simple huts provided for travelers free of charge. The trip had lasted 5 days when we were at the furthest of any kind of civilization we were going to be on that particular outing, truly in the middle of nowhere. There really is nothing there. There are no villages, towns, or industry. The place is a national park after all. Seeing other hikers happen from time to time. You'd see some people in the distance, maybe. Very rarely would you ever come face to face with anyone. So, in the middle of our trip, we were camped in a small clearing, woodland extending around us for a considerable distance in all directions. It was already dark, and we had eaten our evening meal, and all 3 of us were jammed in our only tent. It was a bit cramped, but we fit. We took turns carrying it during the hikes. We were just exchanging some jokes and crude humor in the dark, like guys in their 20s do, about to go to sleep in our sleeping bags. When we quieted down, we began to hear it, talking, and the sound of machinery. Now, given our location, this was profoundly weird. We camped in a tent because there are no huts nearby. Maybe there was another camp somewhere near us. We couldn't quite make out what was being said, but it was definitely a human voice, no doubt about it. But nothing really could explain the sound of heavy machinery. It sounded like an excavator or a tank, something big, powerful, and really not too far away. Combined with the sound of talking, we thought construction yard. But at that time of night, in an unpopulated, protective nature reserve, we got out of our tent. It was cold and pitch black, and the campfire had some coals still glowing. We took out our flashlights. My two buddies have always been a lot braver than me. The sound was clearly coming from the north, maybe half a kilometer away. We thought the construction might be going on behind a small hill some distance away. We could see no lights or anything. We could not make out what was being said. The speaking-like voice was monotonous, and it was impossible even to say what language was being used. Still sounded a lot like a person speaking, though. You may be aware of the sort of spooky phenomenon of hearing a human voice in static. Maybe you've used a blow dryer and been sure someone is talking. Turn it off, and it was just something the brain tried to interpret from the steady hum. Maybe it was sort of like that. It's hard to explain. The machinery-like sound continued, not loud, but you could sort of make out the powerful engine, at times accelerating/adding power, at times at idle. My two friends resolved to go find out what was going on. We put our warm clothes back on, donned boots, and I sat next to the dying fire, and I added a bit more wood to it. I would stay at camp while my buddies left to check out this mystery construction yard in the middle of nowhere. So there I sat. The guys took out their maps, took a compass heading, and left, and I could hear them make their way through the forest, see the light from their flashlights. They were gone. The weird sounds continued, unaltered. They were gone 15 minutes, then maybe 30. Then, by the better part of an hour. It was odd, judging the volume of the sound. They should have reached it, checked it out, and been back already. I added more firewood and tried to make out what the person was saying, but it was too tiny and obscure. The guys had been away for over 2 hours now. I figured they had stayed for coffee with the construction guys or something. Then, the sound stopped. Just like that. It just ended, all at the same time. The engine sound and the voice both just quit. It was very silent. I waited for another 30 minutes, very worried now that something had happened, that maybe my friends were lost. Should I go and try to find them? I shouted their names several times and built the fire pretty big. I was scared when I suddenly saw the flashlights of my friends. Apparently, they were returning in a hurry. The guys got back to the camp out of breath. They told me the following. They had followed the sound beyond the small ridge in the distance. There was nothing there, and it seemed like they were not getting any closer to the source of the sounds. They had to stop every now and again, be quiet, and listen, and be able to walk towards it. They walked and stopped like this for some time, then realized they were not getting any closer. The sounds did not change in volume at all. They decided to go just a bit further several times, when suddenly the sound just stopped like someone pressed a button on a recording. They realized they had been going on for a long time. They were in the middle of the dark woods, alone. They reversed the heading and started back at a brisk pace. Eventually, they saw my big fire from the top of the hill, and they found their way back. The weird thing is, we seemed to think that the sound stopped at different times. They had been gone 2.5 hours in total. They said the sound stopped around the 1 hour and 15-minute mark after they left. Then they started to head back immediately. Return trip taking a bit longer, even though they kept at a good pace. They apparently wandered around for a bit. For me, the sound stopped around the 2-hour mark, just 30 minutes before they returned. We did not sleep that night. Nothing more happened on that trip, and we never found out what that weird construction yard-like sound was about. When we returned to the park's visitor center some 5 days later, we asked around, but no one knew of any ongoing construction taking place in the whole national park area. It has been bugging me ever since. I work at a retail store, a pretty popular one. Its color is red, and I was walking today to go stock something, and I see this lady with a baby in her cart walking in front of me. My wife and I have bad baby fever, so I looked over at the baby and I stopped. Baby's face looked like a video game model who hadn't loaded. It was a face, but looked like a terrible old video game graphic. I thought at first maybe the baby had a deformity, but after about 20 seconds, the face just became normal. I thought I just missaw it until I talked to a guy who was working near me who saw the exact same thing, only it was the baby's face going from normal to weird a little bit earlier. For a bit of context, I have been keeping a colony of stick insects for a good 10 to 12 years now, and pride myself on my ability to spot them amongst leaves and sticks. I have an adult colony in a separate container for juveniles. This year, in the juveniles box, I originally had 13, but one died during a skin shed, and one moved to the adult colony as it was older than the rest. That makes 11. These 11 stick insects have been cleaned out every week, new leaves put in their box, and I always count them out into another container while I do this so none of them get injured. 11 come out and 11 go in. I double check thoroughly through the box so that I have found them all. I cleaned them out about 20 minutes before writing this post, counted them all out, and there were 12. I rechecked and counted them all again, still 12. Somehow, a half-grown stick insect has materialized from nowhere. They are all the same size, and the ones I have are about 4 months old, so it hasn't just hatched. I really don't know what happened, and it's really freaking me out. This just happened quite recently. I was heading towards a place from a train station that was being remodeled, and there's a huge chunk that's currently under construction. I got a bit lost in the area, and my Google Maps was telling me that I should go through one path, but I couldn't since the whole area was basically off limits, and that I should take a detour. This was some busy underpass with people going to the platforms, and there was one big temporary plywood wall with big signs of under construction, unauthorized access forbidden, and no entry. This part got weird. That plywood wall had a plywood door, and people were entering and exiting it like a normal busy door. Completely normal looking people that looked like they don't belong in a construction area. Even some old woman entered it. So then I thought that the map is working fine, so I decided to go through the door, and it got even weirder. On the other side was just a huge empty area, completely under construction. An area of sand, piles of gravel, some pillars, and construction in the distance. The edge of the underpass was completely unfinished. I was really confused since I wasn't far behind the last person who went through the door, and I had no idea where that guy went. There was no path. It didn't seem to look like there was some path where the people would have gone. There's a big gravel road in front of me, going a bit to the side, and the map was telling me to follow some similar path, so I thought maybe I should check it out a bit. Just then, a big Caterpillar tractor sped up along that road, and I wasn't planning to walk near that. I saw the guy in the tractor give me a really strange, confused look, so the next thing I thought was to go back, since I shouldn't be in here anyway. I opened the door, and a few people walking away to a platform looked at me weirdly, like I did when I saw people entering the door. No one entered after I went through, nor came out. So after that, I decided to take the detour since I was in a hurry anyway. I never did figure out where those people went. I knew my uncle had died. My mom had called me and told me the news. It was very sad. She told me in the middle of work, and I told one of my coworkers. He expressed his condolences on my loss. A couple weeks later, my sister mentioned my aunt and uncle going to do something. I said, but he's dead. My sister said, no, he's definitely not dead. I called my mom. No, he wasn't dead. To this day, I'm still not sure how much of it my brain imagined and how much of it was real. Did I really talk to my coworker? Was I even on the phone with my mom at all that day? It still freaks me out knowing that my mind could fabricate so complete and a real memory like that. About 10 years ago, I was walking my dog in the park. It was a nice sunny morning, lots of dew on the grass, so whenever you walked, it would leave a path of dark grass where the dew was knocked off the blades. It would be impossible for anyone, or a dog, to walk through the grass without leaving such a trail. So, Mr. Dog and I are strolling along. He is ahead of me, sniffing around and doing dog things when he stops cold. His hackles go up and he looks across the park, growling. I look to where he is staring, and there is a guy with a dog about 100 yards away, near a large tree. His legs were moving like he is walking. The thing is, even though his legs are moving, his ground speed doesn't seem to match up with the speed of his legs. Kind of like seeing someone moonwalk. Anyhow, I write it off to perspective or humidity or something like that and keep walking. The dog, however, won't walk with me and stays rooted to his spot, making this high-pitched whine. I walk back to the dog and look over to where the guy was, and he is still in just about the same spot, still moving funny. So I decide to check out this odd-walking dude. I hook up the dog to the leash, and we start walking across the wet grass to where he is, thinking our dogs might play together. My dog is definitely not happy. He is clinging to my left leg like Velcro as we make our way across the field. As we progress, I notice that it appears the guy is actually walking away from me, as I don't seem to be gaining on him. At this point, I still don't think anything is odd, until I get to the place where I first saw him, the large tree. I look down at the ground, and I see this almost perfect circle and a 10-inch diameter of dew-free grass. The thing is, there are no footprints leading to or from the circle. The dog, on the other hand, is flipping out and is looking at where we just came from. I look up and see that the guy isn't ahead of me anymore. He is back on the other side of the grassy field, and he is standing just about where I was standing when I first saw him. He has a dog. His dog is staring at me. He hooks his dog to the leash and starts walking towards us. Needless to say, I freaked out and we cut sideways out of the park and down to a populated street. I kept looking back, but didn't see him or his dog again. After telling this story to a couple of friends of mine, they speculated that there was some kind of refraction of light or optical illusion which gave me the impression I was seeing another person, but I was actually seeing myself reflected in the mist or fog or something like that. But I think I saw a time warp of myself walking my dog one day, and I tried to chase it. I used to love drawing portraits when I was younger, but I wasn't very good at it, so I threw them away a lot of the time. But one day, I drew one that I was really proud of, so I kept it. About a week or so later, we had a new girl start in our class, and I thought she looked super familiar. And a few days into the week, I realized that it was because it was the girl that I had drawn. I went home and I found the drawing, and sure enough, nearly identical, nearly because I was 10 and unskilled. It freaked me out, and I felt weird about drawing portraits of nobody ever since. When I was about 15, I was eating some cereal and accidentally dropped my spoon onto the kitchen floor. I watched the spoon fall. As it hit the floor, it just vanished into thin air. I was shocked. I thought surely my eyes were playing tricks on me. It must have just bounced away and gone out of sight or something. I spent 30 minutes searching the kitchen for that spoon. I was honestly extremely freaked out. I tried to think of every possible place it could have gone. There weren't many places it could have ended up. I never found it. I was performing a massage after massage from morning until night in the winter of 2018. One day, I worked with this client named Jerry, a lovely and polite 75-year-old man. I noticed his name immediately because Jerry is not a common name where I live, and he was also standing out because he was the only client I ever had who wanted to talk throughout the whole session. He told me about his wife and their kids. He told me that his son had just graduated from university and that he already had his own business running. He told me he was proud because his son had been severely injured in the army and worked hard to build himself back up. Then he told me he himself was a retired soldier. I have always been amazed by soldiers, so I was listening to him like a little boy. And he finally told me about his cancer of the lungs. He didn't want to have any treatment. He had been told he would die soon, 5 years ago, but mysteriously he survived without chemo. So we talked about many very specific details of his life. As he turned on his chest, I also saw a big scar on the back of his shoulder, which he had received during his time in the army. After we were done, he waved at me and left, but my colleague told me there was something weird going on the way he looked at me. It was like he already knew me. 2 weeks later, I went to get my next client, and it was Jerry. I asked him about some of the things we had spoken about, but he thought it was odd that I knew so much about him. When I asked about his health and his cancer, he was absolutely shocked. The more we talked, I realized we were having the exact same conversation as last time, and he was convinced he had not been here for many, many years. I remembered his scar on the back of his shoulder, so when he turned over, I checked to see if I was going crazy. But they were there, of course. When he came out of my cabin, one of my old colleagues, she had worked there for over 20 years, was shocked to see him. She told me he hadn't come to our institute in the last 5 years, so he was like, "You see, I told you." I ran to check the client's data, and there was no Jerry recorded for the past 5 years. I was shaking, and I remembered I had told my sister about him last time, so I texted her to see if she remembered or if I was going crazy. She remembered. My other colleague came out of the back and told me the exact same thing as last time. It's weird, the way he looked and the way he waved at you. It's like he knew you from somewhere, or that you were dear to his heart. I told her she said the exact same thing 2 weeks ago, but she didn't remember.